The city never slept, but Ethan Cole had learned to live in silence. At 38, he was the youngest tech billionaire in New York, brilliant, driven, and utterly alone. He'd built an empire from scratch, yet his personal life was a barren landscape. Women chased his fortune, not his heart, and he'd stopped believing in love years ago. His world was one of cold, hard numbers, of assets and acquisitions. Human connection was a liability he couldn't afford. Until one cold, rainy morning at a corner café, rain tapped a restless rhythm against the glass as Ethan scrolled through market analytics on his tablet. The world outside was a gray blur, matching the grayness he felt inside. Then, through the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of conversation, he noticed her, a woman behind the counter, somehow managing to juggle a customer's complicated order with one hand and a fussy baby with the other. Her apron was stained with coffee. Her hair was a messy bun, but her smile, it was the most genuine thing he'd seen in years. It was a small beacon of light in his monochromatic world. "Sorry, sir," she said, her voice slightly breathless as she approached him. "Your coffee might take just a minute. My little one's not having a great morning." Ethan looked down. A baby girl with wide, curious eyes stared up at him from a stroller tucked beside the counter. She wasn't crying, just observing everything with an intense seriousness. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in his chest. "It's fine," he replied, and the words came out softer than he intended. He didn't know it yet, but that small, seemingly insignificant moment was the first domino to fall in a chain reaction that would change everything. Sophie Miller never imagined this would be her life. Once a promising architecture student with grand dreams of designing skyscrapers that would kiss the clouds, she now poured coffee 12 hours a day just to keep the lights on. Her husband Lucas had walked out a year ago, leaving her and their baby Emma with nothing but a mountain of debt and a shattered heart. But even on the hardest days, when exhaustion gnawed at her bones, she held onto a fragile thread of hope. Every morning, she'd whisper to her daughter, "We're going to make it, baby girl. Somehow, we will." The next morning, Ethan found himself walking back to the same café. He told himself it was for the coffee, which was admittedly excellent, but it wasn't. He returned the next day, and the next. He became a silent observer, watching how Sophie moved through her world. She was patient with difficult customers, kind to the elderly man who came in for his daily tea, and she never, ever complained. When Emma would start to cry, Sophie would hum a soft, simple lullaby, her voice trembling with exhaustion but saturated with a love so pure it was almost tangible. One afternoon, during the peak of the lunch rush, the café's power suddenly went out, the lights flickered and died, the machines went silent, and a wave of panic spread through the crowded space. But before the chaos could fully take hold, Sophie stepped forward. She calmed everyone down, offered free pastries by the dim light of her phone's flashlight, and somehow managed the entire situation with a laugh and a reassuring smile. She turned a disaster into a quirky, shared memory for everyone there. From his corner table, Ethan found himself smiling, a real, unguarded smile. That night, back in his sterile, glass-walled penthouse, overlooking the glittering expanse of Manhattan, he couldn't focus on his work. The spreadsheets blurred. All he could see was her, not just her face, but the quiet courage she wore like armor. He saw the strength in the way she handled life's relentless blows with such unwavering grace. He was a man who solved complex global problems, yet he was mesmerized by a woman who could calm a crying baby and a chaotic cafe with nothing but her own spirit. A week later, he witnessed something that made his blood run cold. Sophie's boss, a bitter, unpleasant man, began yelling at her in front of a line of customers, all because she'd accidentally dropped a single ceramic cup. Sophie just stood there, frozen, her face flushed with humiliation, taking the verbal assault. Ethan, who had been sitting at his usual table, felt a surge of protective anger. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Hey," he said, his voice firm and cutting through the tense silence. "That's enough. She's doing her best." The entire cafe went quiet. Everyone stared, first at him, then at the stunned manager, then at Sophie. After her shift, she found him waiting for her outside, the evening air crisp and cool. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the pavement. "Actually," Ethan replied, his gaze steady, "I did. Nobody deserves to be treated like that." He paused, then handed her a sleek, black business card. Cole Industries, it read. We're launching a new architectural design department. I've seen your old portfolio online. It's impressive. I could use someone with your vision. Sophie blinked, staring at the card as if it were a foreign object. I make lattes, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't make designs anymore. He offered a faint, small smile. Maybe, but I think you can do more. I'm willing to bet on it. That night, Sophie sat at her small kitchen table, the business card looking impossibly glamorous against the worn wood. Little Emma, sensing her mother's turmoil, toddled over and pointed at the card. Mommy, who's that? She asked in her sweet, childish voice. Sophie scooped her daughter into her arms and hugged her tight. That, she whispered, her own voice thick with emotion, is someone who believes in us. She showed up at the towering headquarters of coal industries the next week. She was a bundle of nerves, but underneath the fear was a core of pure determination. At first, the whispers followed her down the polished hallways, the single mom with no recent experience, the barista hired personally by the CEO. But Ethan saw what the others didn't. He saw the raw talent that had been lying dormant. Her ideas were brilliant. Her designs weren't just about glass and steel. They were human, warm, and intuitive. She brought a soul to the cold world of corporate architecture. It wasn't long before she was an indispensable part of the team. The months flew by. Late nights working on projects turned into quiet dinners. Shared blueprints turned into shared stories. And laughter, something Ethan had thought he'd forgotten how to do, found its way back into his life, filling the empty spaces in his penthouse and his heart. But peace, as he was about to be reminded, never lasts for long. One morning, as Sophie was walking into the lobby, she came face to face with a ghost from her past, her ex-husband, Lucas. He stood there with a smug smirk on his face, holding a thick envelope of legal papers. You really thought you could hide from me in a place like this, he sneered. You owe me, Sophie. You owe me everything. From his office window high above, Ethan saw the exchange. He saw the color drain from Sophie's face, the way her body tensed with fear. He was downstairs in an instant. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. Lucas sized him up, his eyes filled with contempt. Stay out of it, billionaire boy. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Sophie corrected him, her voice trembling but firm. And if you don't leave now, I'll call security. Ethan stepped slightly in front of her, a silent protector. His tone dropped, becoming as cold as ice. You heard her. Leave. Defeated for the moment, Lucas backed away, but not before hissing. This isn't over. That night, Sophie's composure finally broke. I'm so sorry, she confessed, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want you to see that part of my life. The mess. Ethan reached across the table and gently took her hand. Hey, look at me. Everyone has a past. Everyone has a mess. What matters is what you do next. And for the first time in years, hearing those words from him, she felt completely and utterly safe. A few weeks later, Ethan's security team uncovered the full, ugly truth. Lucas had been blackmailing Sophie for months, threatening to fight for custody of Emma and ruin her life if she didn't give him money. Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. He unleashed the full force of his resources, his lawyers, his investigators, his entire network. Within days, Lucas was arrested for multiple counts of fraud and extortion. Sophie was finally, truly free. At the next glittering company gala, Sophie stood beside Ethan, not as his employee, but as his partner. She wore a simple navy blue dress and looked radiant. When a bold reporter asked Ethan who his beautiful companion was, he didn't miss a beat. He smiled, a wide, genuine smile that lit up his entire face, and said, "She's the reason I believe in love again." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Sophie blushed, her eyes glistening with happy tears. Later that night, they stood on the penthouse balcony, the lights of New York twinkling below them like a carpet of fallen stars. I used to stand here and think I had everything, Ethan said softly, but I had nothing, absolutely nothing. Until I met you and Emma. Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder and smiled. You didn't save us, Ethan. We saved each other. He kissed her forehead gently, a promise and a prayer all in one. Exactly. The city that never slept finally felt like home, a place of new beginnings, proving that sometimes the richest people are not those with the most money, but those who've lost everything and dared to find the courage to love again. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, Please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next video.